Hi, my name is Cathryn Lavery. I am founder and CEO of BestSelf. And if you're here, you probably have heard about core values, which is a project that we've been working on with Jay Papasan. So Jay, tell us about The One Thing.
All right. Yeah. So I'm the co-author of The One Thing and helped work on this project. The book, The One Thing, came out in 2013. It is now sold, gosh, where are we up to? 2.4 million copies in 50 different languages. So I love seeing the multinational crowd join us today. That's just awesome. And really, it's about when we identify what our one thing is, there's like a couple of contexts. Mm-hmm. There's our one thing in any moment, like what's our one thing today? But the reason we're here today is about this idea of like, what's our one thing? Like that higher level, what are we actually here for? And there's great value in getting closer to knowing about that, but it's kind of a struggle.
Yeah. And I actually remember the first time someone said, okay, if you had to do one thing that would make everything else unnecessary. And they asked me that question before I read the book. And I was like, did you just make up that question? Because that was very clarifying. And they said, no, it's from this book. And then I read the book, a few years ago, I think 2014 was one of the books I read. And I'm like, oh, this makes sense. So we met in 2018, 2019, we just put together.
There we go.
It's been a long 2 years. And let's talk a little bit about like how this started and the partnership and, where this product came from. Because we didn't sort of at BestSelf come up with the idea for core values. This was something that's in the One Thing book, but it wasn't in a way where it was easy to use it and like figure out, okay, what are my core values?
So like the origin story, and you can just cut me off and say, Jay, get to the point, right? But like I'm a writer, so I'm documenting here. The book came out in 2013. A lot of people tapped into it. And they either wanted to figure out what their one thing professionally was or their one thing for their life. Mm-hmm. And we taught, like, purpose is what we called it, right? What's your purpose? And that's a big driving factor in people's success, because when you know what you're here for, it helps clarify your priorities. And we believe when you know what your number one priority is, your one thing, you're being as productive as you can be. So there's this great asset in learning it.
Yeah.
So I go back to the summer of 2015. Okay. And I got to interview Greg McKeown, who wrote Essentialism that summer. And so I read his book to prepare. And I remember there's a little section in that book called the 90% rule. And I just thought it was really clever. And I skipped over it. But then a few weeks later, I was introduced to a gentleman who sold a 7-figure business because he read my book. And I called him up and I was like, Stu, nice to meet you. Why'd you sell the book? He goes, well, I've read your book and Greg's book. And I knew from your book that I needed to tap into my purpose. And Greg's book gave me a framework. And there was this 90% rule. And it was a hiring thing. If they had 3 qualities they wanted in a new hire, everybody had to score them a 9 out of 10. And so I couldn't figure out my purpose, but I thought, well, here are my 3 values. Does my current job, my current business, is it a 9 out of 10? And he stayed up all night and then told his wife, we have to sell the business. Because his number one core value was about reducing the stress so he could be present. And his business wasn't doing that. And that made a big impression on me.
Yeah.
And then a week later, I interviewed a guy who had the largest CrossFit box in the world at the time. And he sold his house and downsized because of the book. Same thing, purpose.
Yeah.
And so I knew it was on a trail and I started kind of putting it together. So when I met Kaylin, who's on set, one of our core team members, ever since she's known me, I started writing my 3 words, which were family, impact, abundance. I was like, you know what? That's just kind of a shortcut to getting to purpose.
Yeah.
And I can use them. If it's a 9 out of 10, it can become a decision-making tool.
Yeah.
And so starting in 2016, I started putting my words, but I didn't have a mechanism for how to teach other people how to do it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of when we met. It wasn't long after I'd read Dare to Lead by Brene Brown.
Yeah.
And she had an exercise. And I just kind of a mashup. Let's have 3, not 2. Let's score them. Let's have a process, a tactile. And I brought up Kaylin before. She's here on set. I threw this at her, I think 2 weeks before our mid-year event. And she created a prototype that you saw. And we did it and people loved it. It was just an unlocking for a lot of people. They could go through this process, narrow it down and go, I think I've got my 3. Yeah. So that's the origin story. It's not exactly as cool as Batman, but that's kind of how we got here.
Yeah. And it's funny. So when we did it in a coffee shop with the MVP version, which worked really well. But it was just like, okay, what is the compass that's driving me that I don't even know what it is, but you know when you're out of alignment.
Right.
You just don't know why. And so when you get to know your core values, you understand why something either feels right or doesn't feel right, and you can actually explain it. So in this workshop today, we are going to talk about your core values and what they are and why they're important. So they're not just these words that you put on the wall and never think about. They will drive how you make decisions and live with purpose, and how to use this deck, so the core value deck, to discover what your values are. So it's just a framework that you go through. It doesn't take a long time to do it, but if you do it, you will understand why it matters. And then you can use this yourself, with your partner, with your team at work. There's a lot of different ways you can use this deck. You could use it for a business value and then for your personal values. So there's a lot of different ways that we've used this, and coming up with like more playful ways to bring more values into your life than maybe you're missing. And then we'll also talk about common mistakes people make when they identify their values, and like, are they really your values, or are they values that you wish you had, and sort of how to figure out if you're making those mistakes. So yeah, and then we're also going to do questions at the end. So if you have questions, make sure you drop it into the chat, and we'll be adding it to the end to answer them between us.
Yeah, if you could do us a favor, why don't you type question in all caps? That way, when it comes time for the Q&A, our team can just scroll through and find your questions really quickly.
Yeah. Great. So Jay, tell us about your core values. You just kind of mentioned them.
Yep.
Family, impact, abundance. How did you get there? When did you realize that was what they were? And how has that changed your life?
So you can't really see it on camera, but maybe they can now. Like, we laid ours out like a little cross here: family, impact, abundance, and yours, which you can share later. They can try to read them upside down on camera, but we'll save some suspense. When we wrote the one thing, like, I went on a journey too. We spent 5 years researching this, and I started seeing all this research that if you as a business person and as a human being can kind of tap into this compass, you make better decisions and you have fewer regrets. And it was a journey. And so for me, it started with a statement. I wanted to be the best husband and father I could be. So I was already directionally kind of testing it. I put it at the top of my goals. Will this motivate me or not? And so obviously family, right? Yeah. Both of the key points of that, being the best I can be, were around family. And so when I started through this process, I didn't have a deck to choose from. I just knew that I needed 3 words. And I tried to look back into my past and say, what are the decisions that I've really been happy I made? And what are the ones that I've really regretted? And is there any theme to that? And that's what everybody can do. Like, I wish I could say I had a road to Damascus moment, like a lightning bolt from the heavens that just said, you've got a tattoo of these 3 words and they're yours forever. No, it's a journey. So I spent some time and I just tested it out by putting them on my goals and asked, does this motivate me or not? Does this give me a compass or not? So I had done some groundwork, but for me, it was an examination of, when have I really been happy about my decisions and when have I not? And I was even able to talk to my wife and said, I think it's these words. Do you agree?
Well, that's funny, because sometimes I've seen people choose core values, and then when they ask people in their lives, do you think of this? And there's a disconnect between what they think are the core values. And if you look at your calendar, for example, and one of your core values is family, but all of your calendar is filled with work and no family time, then it's like, okay, maybe this is what you want one of your values to be, but you have to make sure your calendar reflects where you're spending your time.
If you want to know what someone's life's about, you can look at their calendar. Right. How they invest their time ultimately is about their priorities. And I actually, I think that they're not real values unless you're willing to trade something, right? Give up something for them. And that sometimes is a test. Like, can you go back and say, was there something that you said no to because you were aware of this, and do you still feel good about it? And we can go down that path if you want to, but like, I've had a chance to test some of these, and it's nice. Like, it's reinforcing. Like, I think these are the ones.
It's funny. So mine are curiosity, impact, and integrity. And when we first were going through, I'm very creative, but one of the questions you asked was like, oh, I thought creativity would be one of your values, because that is in the core value stack. It's just not one of mine, because I felt like curiosity drives creativity. And so one word can facilitate many different things. So you could have creativity or you could have like freedom to create or something else. So it really is the words that could mean a group of different things. So for example, one of mine is also integrity, and my fiance's is authenticity. And it's funny. So when we first got together, we didn't realize at the time until we did this core values exercise, like there was things in our lives that were opposite to our core values, and we like clashed at the beginning. We actually broke up for a couple of months, then got back together. And then when we did the core values and we like looked back at the history, I'm like, oh, I was acting like this and you were responding like this, and that's why we weren't getting on. And then we realized, oh, this is where it comes from, and it worked out.
Well, I think now we're skipping ahead, but like when we put ours together, it's obvious where our overlap is. And I think as a discovery tool, like this is one of the big things we tell people: when you figure them out, like don't keep them a secret.
Yeah.
If you share them with people in your circle, it starts to give you clues, and it gives you insight into what is going right and what's not going right in your life. So curiosity is really a placeholder for where a lot of your creativity comes from.
Yeah.
And integrity is one of your boundaries, right?
So it's like curiosity drives creativity, which you can create impact with. And then a lot of times, you can create impact, and then you have to make sure you're still within integrity with yourself. So there's things, in the last few years where, your values aren't values till they cost you something. And I, turned down some big opportunities because I was thinking like, this is very against what I believe in. And so I have to walk away from it. But it was very difficult at the time. But then when I learned what my core values were, I was like, oh yeah, I'm not silly for walking away. It just was against my values to do that deal. So
it can be super eye-opening, right? When you hear what your significant others are, and you, like you just said, like you and Emily, y'all started connecting the dots. Like, oh, we got in a fight and it's got to do with this.
Well, it's funny because authenticity was one of hers, and I wasn't out when we first met. And that was the issue, is because she was thinking like, you're not being authentic. And I'm thinking, we just met, like, calm down.
Give me a second.
Yeah. So that's where we were at. So what's the relationship between your values and your purpose?
When we wrote the book, the one thing, like, we have a formula, right, for figuring out your purpose, and we call it, it's a mouthful. So I get it. You'll have to go read the book and we don't have to go down there, but it's MVVBP: mission, vision, values, beliefs, and perspective. So mission is kind of like, where are we going? Vision is, what does it look like when we get there and along the way? Values is, what are those things that we hold dear? Beliefs are kind of our rules for the road, and perspectives, how we're doing. Mm-hmm. So like, to me, I was like, I've been taught that for 20 years as a part of my organization, that's how we get to our mission. That's how we get to our purpose. And that's what we wrote about in the book. Mm-hmm. Right in the beating heart of that is values. And in our trainings, whether in a corporate setting or in our community, I just think that that's actually a really important step for unlocking them. Whereas like writing a purpose statement feels heavy. Yeah. And sometimes it, like, to use Emily's word, like, it doesn't always feel authentic. Yeah. It feels contrived. When people find their words and they explain, like, why is it curiosity and not creativity? You start to unlock why it is authentically you. I think this is just something that makes it easier to surface and get closer to your purpose. Yeah,
I totally agree. And it's funny, whenever we were first exploring core values, and I'm looking at different companies and their core values, and I find Enron's core values was something like transparency and truth, and it's one of these examples of, what you have on your wall versus the culture that you have. And so that's something that when you come up with these words, making sure that you are living in accordance with what you choose.
Absolutely.
So let's dive into, how do people use this deck?
Okay, do you want me to do the brief overview?
Yeah,
I walked you through it. So basically, if you open up the deck, you're going to, I don't know, how many cards do we have in here? Like 105 or something?
150.
150. We gave you a lot of choices. And there's also some red cards, and they're kind of wild cards. So if you went all the way through this deck and you got to the end and your word wasn't there, or you played with it, you could even write your own word in. But the way we teach people to do it, I usually just ask people to start going through a succession of culling. Like, the first time is just create 2 stacks, ones that might be and ones that are clearly not.
Yeah. It's like literally like a gut, yes, no, yes, no.
Really fast.
Yeah.
Don't overthink it. And you can tell a lot about how much people like to have their choices narrowed by how big that keep stack is.
Yeah.
Some people, you'll end up and they'll be like this many discards and this many keeps.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes other people that are much more, I don't know, they're just on the other side. They're not worried about what they're throwing away. They'll be like, nope, I got a small stack. And then it's just a progression. So I usually, like when I've done it personally, I like to have 4 across or 5 across and 5 deep. So I can just put them in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
And I start laying them out. And if I want to add another card, I have to remove one.
Yeah.
So the first step is just divide it in half. And then you have a grid, call it a 5x5 or a 4x4 or a 3x3, whatever
Mm-hmm.
that is. You have a limited amount of space and you start laying them out and you start to see a pattern.
Yeah.
But now I can see all the words at the same time. Like I could imagine if you did it, you might have creativity and curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
What I usually tell people when they get to they've got those all laid out, you can start stacking them on top of each other. Like these are values that are in the same family.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to have to start making choices. Family for me is almost another code word for commitment.
Yeah.
Right? And integrity for me. Like the thing for me to be the best husband and father, I couldn't tell my kids to be a certain way and not live it.
Yeah.
And I had to show up every day that way. So those words are all wrapped up in that for
Mm-hmm.
me. So you start to narrow it down. Ultimately, the goal is to get to your 3. And then you have to know what your number 1, your number 2, and your number 3 are. And there's a reason. And we talk about this, like if I want to, we're trying to use this to make decisions, right?
Yep.
I'm going to see if I can make sure I pick the one pin that doesn't work. All right, I'm going to say I've got one value on there. I can draw an arrow through that in any direction.
Mm-hmm.
The moment I have 2 values, I now can choose. Now I can try to align it. In my experience, that third value may or may not be perfectly on the line.
Yeah.
But I want my 1 and 2 to be perfectly lined up. And I want to think that last one's really close. I love a decision where I feel like, man,
Yeah.
I have lined up the dominoes. I knocked over the first one. They're all falling down. So that's the reason we say, what's your number 1? What's your number 2? What's your number 3? And then date them for a while. So it takes about 15 minutes from start to finish. Go through, you do the 2 stacks.
Yeah.
Then you create your grid. And then you just go through a process. I would actually tell people, get an egg timer. Give yourself like 5 minutes so you don't overthink it. Because I think that your heart should be a signal here.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes people don't trust their gut feeling because they're just like, oh, I should be thinking about this. But it's like your gut is already taking in a bunch of different things to make a decision. You just don't know what they are, but there is subconscious things going on. So if you have a gut feeling like yes, no, just go with it. Don't overthink it because you have 150 of these cards. You'll be there all day. Otherwise.
Yeah, if you've got a spreadsheet and start scoring them, this is going to be like a month-long project. But I mean, you created the deck. We had our MVP that was like business cards.
Yeah.
But these are like tactily nice. And I actually like the physical act of separating them and knowing that this is now I can take those and I can turn them over and I'm narrowing the field. So the process itself, I found we've done it on a sheet of paper with people circling them.
Yeah.
Like I think
but
the physical act is so much better. When you circle
it, you still see all the other words and you know, I'm like, oh, did I pick the wrong ones? So if you're watching this and you've already done this exercise before the workshop, let us know in the comments that you've done it and then tell us what your words are. Are any of the same as ours? Have you got all brand new ones? I would love to hear, what you got from it. So
while they're doing that and we're waiting, done. Oh, is travel one of them? Oh man, I feel bad, Linda, because right now you're not getting a lot of travel, but hopefully soon, right? Hopefully soon.
Yeah, let us know in the comments what your 3 words were. And if, there's sometimes when, family or maybe love also are aligned. So my fiance is love, authenticity, and impact also.
Okay.
And so it's funny when
you'll have an exact match on one and one that's very close.
Yeah.
That's cool.
But it is funny when you look back and you're like, oh, this is why we weren't in alignment on this issue. And now it all makes sense. So, how have you, because you're obviously been married a long time.
Over 20 years.
Over 20 years. How have you used the core values in your own relationship?
I think that Well, we have a whole process, right? We do our goal setting retreat. That's where we really tried to introduce this. And a big part of big decisions for us, does this line up with our values?
Mm-hmm.
And Wendy's also in the impact. She's got a different word, but it's impact. That's where I know that we hit.
Yeah.
Right. And she also values adventure. Right. And for that shows up in family, but she wants the family to have adventures together.
Mm-hmm.
So by communicating with each other, we can try to set goals that line up. Like imagine we've got, even with a common value, you and I, we still have 5 dots that we're trying to align.
Yeah.
But now we can say, what are our big goals? Oh, I want to do investment properties. We can ask, well, will that help us do any of those things? Will that serve our family in the future? It allows us a framework. So we've stayed in alignment, not just by knowing them. That's great for understanding why we were arguing over something.
Yeah.
But I think the reason that we're still married is that we've been first unconsciously, and then I think very consciously trying to set a path that's in alignment with them. Because like I said, ultimately, this should be a compass for you.
Yeah.
Right? It's not perfect, but like, hey, is it a 9 out of 10 or not?
Right. We actually have some answers. Edwin, loyalty, growth, adaptability. Love, growth, integrity from Kim. We had, what else am I seeing here?
Oh, I know, it just moved. Right?
Family curiosity,
thank you.
Growth from Alex.
Love, growth, integrity, I see. Love, growth, adaptability. Loyalty, growth, adaptability from Edwin.
Nature, travel, courage from Linda.
Wow, adventure, abundance, and advocacy. You even got the alliteration. I love it, Michael. Oh, that's Coach Bunch.
Nice. Love, wholeheartedness, integrity. Wow. There's a lot of integrity. I've noticed that. Kindness, optimism, integrity. So
those are your people.
Yeah. I got you. Okay. So tell us more about, use it with your wife. How else have you used it in your, professional life?
So, I have a goal sheet that I carry with me. We call it a 411. It's part of the process of living the book. It's like your weekly check-in with your goals. Mm-hmm. And I have them at the top of the goal sheet. What I've found is like with goals, like people they set aspirations at the beginning of the year. Yeah. We often say like, you don't need a new way to set goals. You need to have a way to have a relationship with them. And one of the ways you have a relationship with someone is you go on dates with them.
Yeah.
So exposing yourself to it again and again and asking the question. So every week I'm looking at what are the big rocks that are important for us for this week, this month, and this year. And then I get to the year, I'm working my way through that, and right there are the words. Mm-hmm. So I would tell you, like as a decision-making progress, find a way to make them front and center in your life. At some of our events, I don't have my phone on me. I've seen people take their top 3 and then some of the other ones that were the last cut.
Yeah.
And make a little circle, and they'll take a photo and they'll make it their home screen. Mm-hmm. But they find something that whenever they're confronted with them, that's one of the ways you date them.
Yeah.
You start asking them the question, are these authentically me? Do these actually help me make decisions? Mm-hmm. And you can start testing them out with your friends and family and loved ones. So for me, I just keep them front and center, and they're used for the big decisions. Like my joke is, I don't need the one thing, the focusing question, to pick out the next show I'm going to binge watch on Netflix.
Right.
But if I'm going to choose a new career, if we're going to move to a new town and find a new circle of friends, like that's where these kind of values show up and should be a part of our decision making.
Oh, for sure. That's a great way to look at it. So you're not looking at it for micro decisions like, I'm curious what this thing I've never tasted for lunch, so I have to eat this. It's like, no, it's for big decisions. And also I find if you ever find yourself in a rut, once you know what your values are, if you're looking at your calendar and you're saying, actually, haven't been feeling myself, and then you look at where you've been spending your time. If you're not spending your time doing things aligned with your values, is probably why you feel, unaligned or just like kind of in a rut. I've had that myself. And then when I understand where my times have been going, I'm like, yeah, of course I've felt like this month sucked. I've been doing like admin paperwork all month. You
haven't been doing your curiosity leads to creative work that gets you your impact and starts the whole chain for you. Got it.
So I know you told me a story earlier about Jenny and Mark and how they use the core values. and some couples.
I think the Jenny and Mark Donahue, if they're on the call, hello, they were very brave and they shared how they were living them as a couple at one of our retreats. And it's kind of a funny story because when they looked at their number ones, I believe hers was efficiency and his was it adventure? Is that right? And like, she's like, oh my gosh, that's so lame. No wonder we like have these things going on. Like you want adventure and I want to be efficient.
Yeah.
And it was great because they started connecting the dots. It's like you show your love for your family by making us all efficient, by getting our house in order. And because we have that, we can then do adventures. And they started kind of connecting the dots, not only on why those things were important to them, but how they were making them work. And so I would tell you, like, one of the number one myths about why people don't share them is they're afraid they're going to share them with their friends or their loved ones and realize we don't share values. I don't know. What's the saying? Is it likes love each other? No, it's opposites attract.
Yeah.
And so I love that I have overlap with my wife, but I love that she brings different things to the table too.
Yeah, you don't want to be in a relationship with yourself because then you have no sort of complementary skills or values. That's what I've noticed is someone recently was talking about them being really competitive and their wife was not. And I'm like, that's great. You don't want two people that are super competitive because that might be fun at the start, but that will get old really fast.
So, I mean, I think what it tells you is you have a chance to be complementary. And I also think by identifying it, like you and Emily saying, oh, that's why we were fighting. It gives you a chance to bridge it. And we see the same things like when people get the same fear around setting a 5-year or a someday goal. What if we find out we're both aiming at different targets?
Yeah.
Here's the reality with even the people we love the most. We're kind of doing this, right? We're going in and out of sync. It's not like there's this perfect magical moment that you stay fixed in. It takes work. But if you are naturally diverging because your values are a little different and you're aiming, this gives you a chance to communicate and bridge that gap to stay together and support each other. It doesn't mean that you have to be apart. That's at least maybe I'm blue sky, but actually most people will say the opposite about me, but I do think that is the opportunity.
Well, and also if you're not understanding each of your values, you don't know when you're diverging. You suddenly wake up one day and you realize you're in two different places because you haven't understood what literally is the compass driving you. So if I know your compass is family, impact, abundance, if you are, you don't make assumptions as quickly. If I'm like, oh, Jay's doing this for this reason, I feel like I know you better. We actually did the core values exercise with the Best Self team on a Zoom call.
That's cool.
And actually everyone had done picking the core values. And then we kind of went through our personal story of what it meant to us. And it was so interesting, like how much the team bonded just over like knowing different parts that we didn't know about each other because, it's personal and it's not to do with work. And after it, I'm like, oh, this is great because I feel like I just learn more about these people that I see all of the time in a way that is not normally discussed, especially in a work context.
You get to have insight in what's driving their decision and their behavior. Like now it just starts to fit.
Yeah, and you don't make these assumptions of like, oh, they must be feeling this way because you know them better than you did before.
So I think we have a question from Chris. Should we answer that now? I'm looking to Kaylin for guidance.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Do you reevaluate your values at the end of each year? And what do you do if they change? Do you want to field that first? I have an answer, but I'm happy to.
So I would say you can reevaluate. You should look at your values all the time. So it shouldn't be something like you wake up one day and you're like, on a January 1st, 2022 and think, I should look at my values today. Like have something that you see them all the time, because then you'll soon understand if you're not aligned with them. So one of the things we've done with the self journal is we had people writing their goals every day. And we did that because we wanted people to prime their day to work on that goal. And I also think you should write maybe your core values, because then you'll understand, oh, wait, these might not be my core values anymore. And it's okay if they change, because we all change in our lives. Our path might go a different way than we expect. And so we don't want to hold on to values that 5 year, before Kat 5 years ago had, because I probably had different values then. So, have them somewhere, you see them all the time. And then if you start to feel like, oh, these don't really jive with me anymore, then you could probably look at, oh, I should redo this exercise.
I love that answer. I love the wisdom I heard that I really want to is keep them in front of you. Because a lot of times the first time someone does this discovery, it's very exciting. But that's why we kind of say date them for a while. Like, don't rush out to the tattoo parlor. I think that would be a really big mistake. Because if you keep them in front of you, like with your best self journal, like you're writing about it, you're reflecting, are these actually me? We'll go through some of the mistakes people make. Give yourself some time to ask, like, is this really it? Like, I could see, like, you went right to it, but like, what if you had creativity, but over time you realized that there was a different word that was driving that? And I think those little differences matter.
Yeah.
I think directionally, my values, I'm 51 years old. Okay. I hope that I'm kind of gotten in touch finally. I'm definitely in the slow group here, but I think I finally kind of figured a lot of things out. The word might change, but I think that there's a set under that. Like I told you, value, the family value, for me, it's about integrity and commitment too.
Yeah.
Maybe like when I'm an empty nester, like it morphs a little bit and it becomes something else. But I do think that some of the fundamentals, when you really unearth them, are steady, but how they show up in your world will change. So date them. That would be my number. Like, put them front and center, date them, test them against your decisions, and you'll start to find out, like, are you on the right track? It's just very empowering when you go, I really think this is it.
Yeah. And I think journaling on either decisions or mistakes you made in the past and understanding, okay, why did I do that? What did I learn from it? And was it because I wasn't in alignment with these values? Because once you reflect on, that's actually, I did this exercise and then I reflected on past things that I've gone through. I'm like, oh, this is why I was subconsciously sabotaging this, because it was out of alignment with integrity, for example, one of them. So tell me, you've done this with couples, teams, everything. What are the common mistakes that you've seen when people go through this?
Okay. So the number one thing that people kind of mistake is, and they do this with careers too, we do this all the time, is that we say what we think people want to hear versus what's actually inside.
Yeah.
Like maybe it's fear of judgment. Maybe it is your mother or your mother-in-law or your father, like some other voice, an authority figure telling you who you should be, right, in your head. But a lot of people look up, like when we wrote the book, in the very last chapter, is it Bronnie Ware? I always say her name wrong, but she was a hospice nurse. And the book was called The 5 Regrets of the Dying. And the number one regret is on people's deathbed, they were admitting that they didn't live their life. They were living someone else's.
Yeah.
So I think we have this very strong urge to fit in. We have a very strong urge to want to feel like we're connecting with our tribe, and that can lead us to project. So first and foremost, we want you to share them. But your words are your words. Your words are your words. No one gets to judge them. And you get to explain, if you choose to share them, how they show up in the world. But I do think that mistake of trying to live values for show is a mistake. And Brene Brown, when she wrote about this in Dare to Lead, she talked about she felt guilty that family wasn't one of hers. But her first value is courage. And she realized, and this is where the honesty really helps you, she realized that by living courage was how she proved that she was the best mom and the best spouse, because that was her job, right, as that family role.
Yeah.
And so she connected the dots, like, okay, I know that this is important to me enough that I feel regret for not having it, but this other thing is actually how I express it.
Yeah. And just because you don't have family, like I also don't have family, doesn't mean I hate my family. So it's not if you don't have these words, that doesn't matter to you. It's more of like, what's the compass? And again, one thing can mean many things. So for me, like curiosity and impact is how I would provide for my family or show up as my best so that I can be the best, partner that I can be. So, or daughter and everything else. So yeah, don't pick a value because you think your parents are like, why is my mom might be watching this right now and she's like, family isn't your values, but it's totally fine to have that as long as you're being true to yourself or not.
Right. And it gives you the opportunity to explain to mom or to your friend or whatever, how these values actually make the relationship work. And that's what people who love us do, is we embrace us for who we are. Yeah. And that's how we get to express ourselves. So be true to yourself. And then the second one that we see a lot is very close to that. But instead of it being about other people, it's about being someone you want to be, but you aren't. And I get it. We're on a journey. We're growing and we're aspiring, but it can be the same sort of thing. So I feel like now, instead of worrying about other people judging us, we're judging ourselves.
Yeah.
The moment we say, but my future self would value family, or oh my gosh, I can't believe that Jay doesn't have integrity. Right? Clearly, he's a scoundrel and he's ripping people off.
Right.
Right? Now I'm judging myself. So don't let other people judge you and don't judge yourself. They both come back to the same place. Ask the question, when I've made decisions that I was really happy with and ones that I'm not happy with, can I connect these words to them and understand those decisions better in context? And if I'm too young to know that, then let's try them out and live them for a while and see if they are authentic. Would you add anything to that number 2 mistake?
No, I think that completely makes sense. I've also done things where I'm like, oh, this is the type of person I would want to be. And then you look at all of your past actions and like, oh, that's actually not me. And that's also fine.
I think our blind spots is always an opportunity. I can't remember what the construct is. There's things we know about ourselves and things we don't know about ourselves.
And things we don't know, we don't know.
And well, I was going to say the other half is there's things that people know about us and things that people don't know about us. So something I know that the world doesn't know is my secret.
Yeah.
Something they know that I don't know is my blind spot. And so you look up, and so it plays in here. Like you may have a blind spot around something and you're aspiring, but boy, that won't serve you. If you keep it a blind spot and you fail to acknowledge it, you can't make adjustments to cover up. Right? Anyway, I'm getting way down the rabbit hole there. Number 3, event and a process. So maybe speed. I think I work with a lot of entrepreneurs and business people, and they think that I'm going to do this exercise. I dropped my $25. I've got my core values. I'm going to do this, and it's there. It is a process, and I think we've said that a lot. It's a journey. I think the research that I read, less than 20% of the world at a young age is really clear about their purpose. So it's very rare for people to just like have that lightning bolt moment and go, I've got it. I'm going to be a doctor and this is my values. That's very rare. Most of us are on a journey. So just acknowledge that and give yourself some grace and say, I'm going to be on a journey and figure this out.
Yeah. And again, date them for a while. Don't marry them right away. Don't go to a tattoo parlor.
Yes. And then I guess the last one with the mistake would be never sharing them. If you're the only person who knows your values, then the people that care about you the most and that you care about the most are missing an opportunity to connect with you, to understand you fully, and to really know what's driving your decisions. I shared this on the podcast from Kaylin. I just it just dredged up from like college French. Like one of the books I read, like they said the definition of hell is that we know our intentions and our actions, but the world only sees our actions. So they never know our intentions. Like this is the thing. Like, yes, sometimes our actions don't align with these values, but if people know that that's truly what I'm striving and who I am, they give us more grace. So sharing them allows those conversations to happen. That still may be a horrible example from French class in freshman year, but that's where I connect the dots. If you don't share them, you don't get to have those really meaningful conversations that bridge those misunderstandings.
Yeah, and also you don't get to know people more. So like I just talked about the Best Self team, I've talked to these people on Zoom a lot, but it was only when we were like, okay, let's talk about our 3 core values. And now we've added it to our team sheet so that everyone on the team knows, okay, we talk about love languages and then also core values so that you have some idea of like, this is what drives this person. If for example, someone on the team's curiosity and fun maybe, or joy, and they are stuck in Excel sheets all the time. I'm just picking things I hate to do. Right. I'd be like, this is not a good for them. So there's a lot of different ways to use this to both get to know people and then also know what drives people and what energizes them, which once you know that, you'll know what will get them excited to start their day.
Yeah. I mean, that's like, if you know that the spreadsheet work is necessary evil, right? You're a business person, you need to know your numbers. You can now prepare to do it and reward yourself for doing it so that it never gets you bogged down or and you would never take a job as an accountant.
Oh God, no.
Right? That's like how knowing this should drive some of your decisions.
Yeah. Great. So let's take some time to get some questions from people. If you have a question, drop it in the chat so that we can go over them. Someone asked, what if I can't narrow it down to my top 3? There's so many values that are important to me.
Let's go back to the process. So I would challenge you to pick 3 and then call them my interim 3. I know that some people will take a picture of the surrounding ones. And then over time, you can start playing with it. Like for me, like I said, I could have had integrity or commitment right there with family.
Yeah.
And I would have kind of stacked them and said, I know these 2 are right. And I'm going to have to live a little life to figure out what that last one is looking at.
Okay, cool.
So narrow it down, give yourself a little at a time. Oh, there we go. We're getting some of your questions that are coming in through all the different channels up on a screen for us to read. Okay.
What other books did Jay read before writing the one thing? I got the 90% rule, but missed the first one he mentioned.
So the 2 books that I think directly, like we even attribute quotes, I think, on here. Greg McKeown wrote a book called Essentialism. It's white and black and red. They're
with
really
a scribble.
Yeah, it's very nice, kissing cousins there. And then the other one was Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. She directly addresses this later in the book. And it was the combination of those 2 that kind of led us down a journey to really kind of make a process that we could live with that reflected the one thing.
Should I be thinking about what I feel my core values were versus what I feel they should be to align with my goals? Or is that backwards? That's a good question. My thought would be, you should figure out your core values first, because sometimes we make these goals that are, maybe it's something we grew up with. We're like, oh, this is a financial goal that you should have, but actually it's not what makes you happy. And so you go for this goal that you think, oh, this is the thing I should be working on. And then you get there and you realize, why do I still not feel fulfilled? I think if you figure out what your core values are and then make sure that your goal aligns to it, because it's like the saying of, when you climb a ladder and you get to the top and you realize it's on the wrong wall, you don't want to hit that goal and realize I'm actually not even close to where I want to be because I didn't understand what my core values were.
Perfect. I mean, that's the whole point of making it a compass, is to help you set goals and make decisions. I will say this, in the very beginning, you can look backwards and say, what are some of the goals that I set and either achieved or failed? And how did I feel about it? That can be clues for you that you're on the right path. Because our history tells us how we made decisions and how we felt about them in the past.
Yeah.
Right? Because you can set a big goal, like I want to make a bunch of money. Well, I think on both of ours, that might show up as a hollow victory just by itself without hitting any of the other ones. So yeah, we hit the goal, but why did that leave us not feeling more fulfilled? Well, maybe because at one point I had wealth there before I had abundance. Because I thought maybe as a business person, I need to think about that, but now it was something different.
Interesting.
And Caitlin, I'll ask this, and it's probably too late. If there was a name to go with the question, I would love to be, wouldn't it be cool to say, I almost started saying the name of the person on the Google sheet that was writing it, thinking that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we'll just keep going. I'll let you, you're the host. Which one do you want to go to next?
In your experience, how young can someone be to use this process? We are raising grandchildren. One is almost 9 and starting to ask life value questions. Wow.
I mean, I think that's the clue, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think that if my experience, I've got 2 teenagers, a 15-year-old and a 16-year-old. You can lead a horse to water, right? You can't make them drink. Never has that been truer than for teenagers. But the moment they start asking questions and they're curious, this is a great way to help them find answers.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that you're asking that question. Would you like to do an exercise? And, you can help facilitate it. I was really lucky. My son, their school, they talk a lot about core values.
Okay.
And so when we had a new CEO come on board, I got a chance to have coffee with him. I asked Gus, I said, what do you want me to ask my new boss? I'd just be curious. What would you like to ask him? He said, well, I'd love to know what his core values are and whether or not he's ever paid a price. And I was like, as a parent, I was like, yes, yes,
Yeah.
right. That's great. And then I asked Carl and he said, what was it? Family, something in country. He's a Navy guy.
Yeah.
And he laid his 3 out. And I was like, wow, you really know? And I said, has it ever cost you anything? Gus wanted to know. And he shared a time in his career where he was managing 2,000 Home Depot stores on a rocket ship. But it was God, family, country. And Sunday mornings, he's getting his family to get together to go to the car. And he'd get a call from the boardroom. Hey, we're having an emergency meeting, show up. It happened once too often, and he left the job. And I was like, hey, that's awesome. Like right here, right months before this launch, it was an example of someone who's very clear about who they are and how that impacts their decisions. It just gave a great example and no regrets. Walked away from millions and no regrets.
I love that question. What are your values? And tell me a story of when they cost you something.
Oh, Mr. Scott Blumen. Scott Blumen was my roommate in Paris when I lived in Paris.
Oh, wow.
He, we can't tell all of those stories on the air, but an amazing person, and got to go to his wedding and sleep through it.
Sleep through it?
Yep. It was an unfortunate moment in my life, but it's a funny moment between the two of us.
Well, now he's here. So you're still friends.
Yes. Yes.
How young? Oh, yeah. So I think you answered the question. If they're asking life value questions, that means you can bring it up to them. I also feel like I don't have kids, so I'm totally guessing. But if you're talking about your core values as an adult of like, oh yeah, this is why I'm doing it, and sort of introducing in a way like, oh, this is just my core values, at some point they're going to be like, wait, what are mine? And so instead of bringing back a deck and saying like, we must use this, more of just implement your own core values into a conversation. And at some point they're going to be like, oh, I want to know what mine are.
Bravo. I love that. That's like great leadership, by the way. Like that's what a great leader should do. And that's what a great parent can do, is live your values, talk about them. And then eventually people will ask, well, how did you figure that out?
Yeah.
Love it.
Can you tell a little bit more about the process of choosing 150 words on cards? Thank you, Al Amar.
So Al, when I first saw this, I only had one example, and that was from Brene Brown. So I'm a researcher. That's one of the things I do when we write. So I immediately went, and I think I read about, I'm looking at the screen instead of the camera, thank you. I went and I got about 15 white papers, and there's lots of different constructs out there for core values and why they're important. And so I just started going through them, and they called them like it's an inventory of core values. What would be the language in the white papers. So I used a lot of those, and then we started pulling them out, and it was kind of like randomizing them. I want to have my influences not come from one place. And then we started using them with audiences. And so you can start to see like the things that nobody ever picks, right? Pretzels did not make the list. Love them, but no one's going to say whatever that is. Great, then that doesn't make up on the list. At some point, I would love to have a software solution where you could really start to see the patterns, but that's a future project.
Got it.
Some of them were added for the wild cards too.
The wild cards, right? The feedback from our events, people would write it down and say, like if someone said time, like here we are, like we teach people to invest. Like, why is time not on your list? It's like, God, yes. Advocacy. Yeah. Thank you, Caitlin.
Do you do this exercise from a personal, business, or career perspective, all three, or is this strictly personal core values that carry over into other parts of your life? Christian Mercer. So kind of the Enron example I gave earlier of, the values on the wall that don't match what your company is actually doing. I think you should have your own personal values, but if you're in a business, like your personal values don't have to be the business values, but the activities that you're doing within it should align somewhat with what your own personal values are. So for me, if I'm like creating product and running BestSelf, I'm wanting to, be creative, create an impact with what we do, and then make sure that I'm leading with integrity. So those align for me in my job, but BestSelf's core values aren't specifically mine. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think I align with that. I would just say, I read somewhere that we're at our happiest when we can be the same person in all the rooms of our life. And I think if you have to become a different person at work than you are at home, if you become a different person on Sunday morning in a church pew than you are on Saturday night, ultimately that dissonance will create stress in your life. And at some point, we need to just kind of lean into who we are authentically. And I think the longer I've lived, the happier I am when I'm living my values.
Yeah.
And so I would just say, ultimately, you may look up, and I've had this, where I'm working with someone, I'm a member on the team that I'm not jiving with, maybe a leader, maybe a company that I've been a part of. I'm like, maybe we're not a match.
Yeah.
Right? Because we actually don't have, our values may not be shared, they may be in conflict.
Yeah.
And that can be a real problem.
I've been there. So
yes,
I totally understand what that's like. And it's funny when it's difficult to work on something with someone and grow something when there's a conflict with values there, because it's almost not aligned. It's like you're helping someone else with conflicting values grow something together. It just doesn't make sense. And when you know what your core values are and you look back, you're like, oh, that's one of the reasons why that wasn't going so well.
Did we answer Scott's question? I feel really guilty because I think so. It was just like making sure that we answered it. Good. It went away. All right.
You want to be.
He can always holler at me if he's unhappy with the result. So that's good.
I'll put Jay's personal number in there.
Yeah.
I am 50 years old and in a job that's not fulfilling. Sometimes I feel I'm too old to make a change. If I do the work and discover my core values, do you have any suggestions as to how to remake myself at the workplace and hopefully make a career change?
Well, I think we both can address that. We were just kind of talking about it. Well, Molly, thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. And it's real and it's transparent. And I think we've all been there at different times. If you get really clear, I think one of the opportunities you have is to ask the question, is there a way to connect my current environment, my current spouse? Like I could do this for anything, my current friendship. I've made these investments. I have sunk investments of my life in this place. Is there a way for me to connect the dots that I wasn't aware of? Now that I'm aware of who I am, can I start bridging the difference? Mm-hmm. And we tell a story, I do it, I know when I teach, and I think it's also in the book, about the rider and the elephant. And it came from a book called The Happiness Hypothesis, where you imagine a little kid riding on an elephant through the forest, and the author asked, is there anything this little kid could do to make the elephant go in a direction the elephant did not want to go? And the laws of physics say a 60-pound kid on top of a 2-ton elephant, there's no way to do it. And his point was the rider is our intellect and the elephant is our heart. So the elephant's always been in charge. So my question to you, Molly, and sometimes our circumstances are not good. I get it. There still may be a chance that your heart led you there and you need to find the connection. So I would be open to that. Look for a connection. Like I did end up here. If the elephant's in charge, sometimes you take a wrong corner. I get it. But I would ask for that connection first. And then if you're really clear, then I would go on a search to find a place at age 50. Hey, you've got a whole other career left that you can live and make an impact. Go find a place that matches that. And if someone sat down with me and said, hey, I want to share with you my values. Can you tell me if your company is going to help me live them or not? I personally would love that answer. Yeah. Here's someone sitting in front of me that knows what motivates them. And people who understand their own motivation, how do they show up at work? Oh, way better. Also, if you went to your manager or boss or whoever it is and said, these are my core values. My job right now, this is not in alignment with this, but I see this opportunity within the company that I can help with and I'll be motivated. I'd be like, yes, please. So just having someone come to you with that sort of motivation and core values, like as a manager and a boss, usually you're dealing with a million different things at one time. So you don't have time to think of everyone's core values and where people, you try to, but it's difficult. So if someone's coming to you, they're cutting out all of the guesswork. They're saying, these are my core values. This is what I would like to do. Can I do this? I'd be like, yes, you can do that. Can I tweak it a little bit? So I would just say, if you're sitting down with your manager, there's what you want to do and there's what you're good at. And as a manager, I'm making that assessment based on what I've seen so far. And so just because you want to do it, I want that to match. I want that to be my legacy as an employer, that people were in the right seat on the bus, living their values. I would ask the question just slightly differently. Boss, what would I have to do to earn the right to do what Caitlin does every day? I think that I could knock it out of the park, but what would I have to do to earn that? Now, that's a question that shows you whether you have a cool boss or not. Yeah. Because it puts the onus on them to say, well, if you did these things, then absolutely. Now you know what you have to do to earn that versus being given it. So I just found that question about earning is a powerful, powerful question you can ask in a lot of work situations. And to go back to that question,
in that book, The Regrets of the Dying, I think one of the things that there was a story where this guy's like, I hated law school. I became a lawyer. I hated being a lawyer. And then I was a lawyer for 50 years and I hated every second of it. And so he knew when he was, early 20s, he hated that, but he stuck with it the rest of his life and hated every single second. It wasn't like, oh, I actually enjoyed it after a while. It's like, no, I really despised my whole job. And so I also used to be an architect. And I'd spent, 7 years at school, got all of the letters after my name. And then I was like, oh, actually, this is not what I want to do. And oftentimes people just stay in something because they've already sunk cost into it. But you don't have to do that, because when you do that, you're essentially letting someone else control your life. You're letting the 7-year younger version of you decide, I'm going to do this the rest of my life.
If that was an investment, you'd be throwing good money after bad.
Yeah.
Now, the caveat, because I've got my young children in mind, there's some things that you don't know you like or not in the beginning.
Right.
And so the younger you are, the more willing I would be to date it for a while before I gave up. But like, Molly, I think you've earned the right to know whether it's satisfying or not. You're there. All right.
Business values and personal values. Is that like ethics and business ethics? Can the two really be separate? I don't believe they can be separate. I think, like Jay was saying, you show up, if your job is going completely against your values, then you will not be able to work in that and feel in alignment, because you're essentially growing something that you don't really agree with. So there's going to be like stress for you to do that. And I've been in that situation, and it is very difficult. So no, I think you need to be in alignment with the business values, but the business, like, your mission statement doesn't have to be your personal mission statement, but the direction of the business should be in alignment with your values, so that you're not essentially growing something that is completely against what you believe in.
Yeah. And I think that comes back to the elephant. Like, sometimes there's a pattern there that you can connect the dots. And sometimes we can find motivation when we're completely burnt out. I was coaching this lady, and she ran a business, and she had been hitting a wall. I mean, it's a great wall at 12 million in gross income.
Yeah.
Great business, but she just hit a wall again and again and again. And she's like, I want to quit and I want to go do something else. I want to take care of like animal shelters. Like, she was going to go and do something very different.
Yeah.
And I just asked, can you connect the two? Like, you have an amazing business. You could fund 20 animal shelters because you do this so well. Is there a way for you to connect your mission to what you're doing? And I saw her exactly a year later, and she says, I'm completely re-energized. We've grown by 50%, because now I knew why I was working, and I connected this thing I was good at to something that mattered to me.
Yeah. Alex P., how do you differentiate between your passion and your purpose?
All right. So they're very different words. I actually think that following your passion can be a huge mistake. And we talk about this a little bit. Again, a lot of the juicy stuff is at the end of the book. But like we say, we want to be happy. And we kind of, in the book, lean towards coaching people to be fulfilled. Fulfillment is very different. Fulfillment is achieving things that matter to you that you may not have even enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's a hard day of work, and it was not even that much fun, but you did something that matters. That's purpose. I am passionate about like fly fishing. I would never be a good professional fly fisher, and I would probably get bored, because like I'm now doing something that I really enjoy. I can do things for causes I'm passionate about. So passion can be important, but I find it to be like happiness. I can't control it the same way I can purpose. I can live my purpose. Passion may be a little bit more fleeting, but I just know that that's something I worry about telling people just to pursue their passions. Let's make it more meaningful than just passion being about what I really love and enjoy.
Yeah, I totally agree. What is your one thing, and how does it reflect your values?
Well, impact, right? Family, impact, abundance for me. I write books. I do it because I want to live my values to show for my family, right? That's the integrity commitment. I don't think I would have finished this book 5 years in the making if I hadn't been really clear about who I was working for. I had a bigger reason than just me.
Yeah.
I'm actually a B student, maybe less without the right environment. right? I have the right environment. I'm an A+ student. So I know that about myself. This is how I get the most satisfaction on impact. I know why I'm doing it. I get the reward as impact, and it creates abundance. Like for me, it's like, boom, my one thing is to create products, books, most likely that have an impact in the world and create abundance. Like it's weird. It only took me 45 years to figure it out. But now that I'm clear, I can look back on past decisions and go, yeah, that was the time I was really happy.
Yeah.
I came home, I'd worked my tail off, but I was really fulfilled. So what about you?
Awesome. Curiosity. So I love learning new things. I like creating things. I like really just diving into just following curiosities. And so that's what drives products at BestSelf. I like creating frameworks for people to improve their lives and become their best self, which create an impact. So we hear customer stories all the time of, whether it's the core values deck or the intimacy deck or the self journal, it's like different parts of your life that help you show up as your best self. And then, doing all of that with integrity and making sure that I'm aligned with, not just growing the business, but really making products that change people's lives. And that's been, a few years ago, I remember at this point, I wasn't, you're trying to grow this business and the easiest way to do it is like more products. And it got to the point where I was like, we weren't releasing them. And I had this like stuck feeling. And I'm thinking, this is actually not a great product. It's not even, it's like a Me Too product. I've seen a bunch of other ones. It's not doing anything special. So why are we wasting our time here? And it took courage.
It wasn't going to have impact, and it wasn't integrity because it wasn't going to have impact. So I can hear the values showing up right now. Yeah.
So it was like, what are we just trying to grow revenue by selling stuff that people don't need? I don't want to do that. And so it was hard to make the decision of like, actually these products that we've been working on, we're not doing that anymore. We're not releasing them and we just wasted our time, but I feel better about it because of that. And so those are just examples of
I'm glad our product made the cut.
Yeah, of course. And if you want your core values deck, you can get it at bestself.co or theonething.com. And you can also buy the One Thing book at theonething.com also, which is a great book. And
or wherever you buy your favorite bookseller locally or whatever.
Yeah, anywhere books are sold.
There you go. Thank you for hosting me today. Thank you for sharing in this journey with me. And I love how we intersect.
Yeah.
Hopefully made an impact today.
Yeah, I hope everyone has enjoyed this. And please let us know what your core values are. Either like, post them on social, share them on Twitter, share them in this chat, whatever it is. Like we said, you want to share your core values with both people that you don't know and people you do know so that you also have to show up like your values. Great. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today, y'all.